Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy Memorial Day, wherever you are. I'm your host, That Lit Astro Chick, the channel where we discuss the natal charts of writers, artists, and anyone else that I find interesting. Now, I know that I've been MIA for the past couple weeks, and that's been because I've had a slew of applications in terms of things that I wanted to accomplish for my personal life. And some of those are starting to come to the close. I still have that one exam that I need to study for. But I did want to come on here and just drop off a little natal chart, especially because I've been thinking about some stuff going on in my personal life, and this kind of relates to it. So I've debated on how much information I want to share about my personal life on this particular channel. I do think that it would be interesting, astrologically speaking, if I did, because of some of the aspects that I have in my chart. But I'll start with this. The first one is that I was really into swing dancing. I want to say my first year of college, and I've had a very off and on relationship with it. It's primarily been off, not because of like the dancing itself. It's been because of either elements in my life or certain elements about the community that I struggle with navigating around. And this past month, I just realized that I want that old thing back. I really do want to devote more of my personal time to dancing. And I might talk a little bit more about that in terms of astrology. But Frankie Manning's birthday, it recently passed. So I wanted to also distract myself because I also have the love life of a 7th grader. And I'm very tempted to do a drag on Leo males. He's probably going to find this, but before I do that, I wanted to go over Frankie Manning's natal chart in honor of his birthday. So Frankie Manning was a choreographer. He was one of the pioneers of swing, the East Coast, as well as the Lindy Hop. He was one of the first people who created the air step. Now, if you've ever seen the movie Malcolm X and the opening scene that they have when they're in the dance hall, I believe he helped to choreograph that, and that was how I knew about him when I was maybe like 8 or 9. But I really did want to take a look at his chart because, like I said, I am thinking about something that I would like to write. I have so many things that I would like to write, and I just have not written those yet. So without further ado, let's discuss Frankie Manning's natal chart. So Frankie Manning was born on May 16th, 1914 in Jacksonville, Florida. I don't have the birth time, so I just went ahead and used a placeholder. So the first thing that I noticed about Frankie Manning is that he has a Gemini stellium. So he has his Venus, which is at the 0 degree of Cancer, Pluto at the 29th degree of Gemini, Moon at the 22nd of Gemini, and Saturn at the 19th degree of Gemini, and Mercury at the 15th degree of Gemini. Now, the reason as to why this is really important to me is because, like, when I think about swing dancing and what it represents, it's one of those dances that tends to go into the other category of the dance world because it's not ballroom and it's not street. But it's a dance that's more focused on jazz and interpretation. It's more based on your lead and your follow playing against each other. So they're going to play against each other as well as against the music. And there are, of course, different covers and different renditions of the music. And that, to me, it does remind me a lot of like what a Gemini placement would be, with Frankie's Pluto being at that 29th degree of Gemini. That means that he was born right at the tail end of when communication experienced a lot of revolutions during this time because Gemini deals with phones. So you had more people that were communicating over the phone. You also had more of an increase in newspapers as well as magazines to influence people's thought processes. And also because he does have that hardcore Gemini stellium, it does represent a focus on urbanization as well as within close partnerships and peers because Gemini relating to the 3rd house, it deals with your peer groups. So another reason why I thought that this was interesting is because of what swing dancing represents. which is that it is a dance that brings a lot of people very close together who will be very similar in terms of their love and their appreciation for dance as well as for jazz. And it's like an entire community. So sidebar, I was talking about this when I was going over something that I recently was invested in. I'll just say it like this. This might become a whole new story time. But I was talking with one of my friends who do not swing dance about like the importance of like the last dance and the symbolism behind it. And then she turned around and she said, what if Bridgerton is this shit? Because it's something that's like very specific to the community. And Gemini is the sign that deals with community. It deals with peer groups, close relationships, as well as K through 12 years. I've even heard Lindy Hop being described as the dance of the youth because a lot of the heavy hitters during this time were very young when they started dancing. I want to say that around the time, according to Frankie's autobiography, when we had a lot of the dancers who were in Harlem. They were probably in like their late teens, early 20s, and then it all kind of stopped once World War II came around, and then they all had to be serious and grow up and either go to war or get jobs. But I did find that to be interesting because Gemini is also one of the signs of the zodiac that deals with youth. In addition to that, to have that Venus at the 0 degree of Cancer, the 0 degree, it's going to represent either something that's going to go really, really well or really, really won't. I did find that Venus in Cancer to be interesting because it does show that his culture and his heritage was very important in terms of what it was that he was going to show the world or leave the world with. And depending on some of the literature that you can find about swing dancing, and I have my own little opinions about this, but the world would not have swing dancing if it was not for Black people and for Black culture bringing it out within the mainstream. So I'm wondering if astrologically that has something to do with it. Another thing that I find interesting about Frankie's chart is that his moon is conjunct to his Pluto. So if I'm remembering this correctly, he to Harlem when he was very young, and that Gemini moon, especially at that 22nd degree, it's going to mean that he was most likely placed in positions where he either had to control something or be controlled. And there was a very strong element in his life, especially when it comes to that communal setting. So he could have been somebody who like stayed with like relatives or like close friends. It would have been within like one community. And his mother also could have been very young at the time when he was born. But the moon conjunct to Pluto also shows that his earlier life meant that he had a lot of support, and his subconscious of bringing this dance out into the rest of the world is something that was very much supported. To me, it also shows that there was definitely a really big indicator of fame with that. Another interesting aspect that I find in his chart is that he has his Mercury Gemini, and that is running a sextile to his Mars in Leo. So Mars in astrology is going to refer to what your true identity is. And with his Mars in Leo, he was definitely a star. He was someone who had a lot of star power, even though like the history of swing, it is something that has gone in the mainstream and out of the mainstream. It's kind of like gone in and out, and he's moved in and out of that. But I think that Mars in Leo shows that he was always confident that it was going to make a comeback. And in addition to that, I do also see how this could make him somebody who would be ripe for a lucky break, especially with sharing that out into the world, the rest of the world, because he does have his Jupiter. It's running contraparallel because it's not an exact opposition with his Mars in Leo, that Jupiter in Aquarius. So this to me shows that a lot of his luck and a lot of his good fortune in life, that was to come, one, from his upbringing, because his moon does trine with his Jupiter. So he was someone in life who had a lot of lucky breaks that were just handed to him. Somebody who could have experienced a lot of wealth and expansion in this life, especially when it comes to that expansion in terms of his dance and sharing the dance with so many different people that were all around the world. Another interesting aspect that I found was because like I said, he does have a lot of like Gemini energy, is that his sun trines his Uranus. His Uranus, which is at the 11th degree of Aquarius. So this is going to show a representation of his identity. And Uranus is also at its home when it's in Aquarius. So this to me shows that he could have been someone who could have been like very quirky, very fun, very interesting. And this meant that he was going to be someone who would bring this forward out into the world. Now, the last little bit that I'm going to talk about, because I didn't want this to be too long, was his North Node. So his North Node and his Chiron, those are conjunct, and those are both in Pisces. So what this means is that in a previous lifetime, Frankie could have been someone who could have come from many past lives where he was constantly in service to other people. And what he was supposed to experience in this particular lifetime, because he did pass away, I want to say in 2004, what he was supposed to experience in this lifetime was an appreciation for art and for culture. And you know what? This actually is very interesting to me when I think about it now. And I didn't get too personal, but I think I will talk about this part. So when it comes to the swing scene, it's actually a very inclusive environment. Specifically when we're talking about race. So I don't know if I will post the excerpt of the story that I wrote by yours truly, but the swing capital of the world is Seoul. It switches back and forth in between Seoul and Singapore. And whenever I've talked about this with people, they're like, well, why on earth would it be there? And it's because of the fact that this music that, that we dance to and swing, the big band and the jazz, it's the only purely American genre of music to come out of this country ever. And it's also the genre of music that represents when America was a superpower. So there's a bit of dancing to that nostalgia a little bit. And the reason why I bring that up is because Pisces, even though it is ruled by Neptune, it also has that Jupiter influence, because Pisces is, in fact, in its home when it's in Jupiter. And Jupiter, it's going to refer to adoptions. It also refers to other cultures. It refers to trafficking. It also refers to voyages. So things that will tend to be cast out very far and wide. And also because of that Jupiter influence, it's going to represent something that will transcend race. So that I actually think is something that he did fulfill in this particular lifetime when it comes to transcending to approachable and being adoptable by all cultures, by all ethnicities. His purpose in this life was to discover that even though we may have our intrinsic differences, we all are indeed one. This was most likely something that could have been very difficult for him to endure, because he does have a multi-planet square with that Gemini stellium, as well as with his Chiron and his North Node in Pisces. So there could have been some type of change required on his end in order to fulfill this. And I know that in his autobiography, he discussed how initially Lindy Hop was seen as being like a quote-unquote a black dance. It wasn't something that the white dancers did. And how he was penalized for it at the Savoy Ballroom, because initially they were separated, they were segregated. And segregation was the standard during the time that he was alive, especially in his youth. But one of the interesting things about swing is that depending on the part of the country that people were in during that time, there were certain parts that actually were not segregated. And one of those, in fact, were ballrooms, especially in the West Coast. So swing, in a way, it's also a dance that represents integration. I see it as being a dance that represents like the best of America. And this is where I'm going to conclude it, because I wasn't really sure if I wanted to talk about what happened as far as my own little like personal thing. But I'll give a little teaser to this in terms of what happened. I might discuss this later on. If anybody is interested, let me know if you want to comment below. But something that I always found to be really interesting about Frankie Manning is when he, in his autobiography, when he discussed the politics around dancing. And one of the things that he had warned about was, if you have a dancer who's really serious into it, but their partner is not, or if you have a dancer and they're married, but their dance partner is not their spouse, that's divorce. That is like room for drama. That's room for, it's just a lot. And I thought of that when I went through what I went through. Like I said, that might, in fact, be a story time if I can figure out how to talk about this without bringing up this person's name or details. But I did just want to say that I always found him to be a really fascinating figure. I wish that I had had the chance to meet him, and I wanted to do this natal chart as like a tribute to him. So this now concludes my natal chart reading on Frankie Manning. Please make sure to like and subscribe and tune in for the next video.